Hello, this is Pretty Guardian, and in today's video, we are going to be going through my top 5 favorite animated fight scenes of all time. There may be some spoilers ahead in the specific fights, so feel free to jump around at your leisure. I am going to start this list with the only one that is from a Japanese animation studio, and that is Puella, Magi, Madoka Magicka, the movie Rebellion. Madoka Magicka is an anime series that came out in 2011 and brought a much darker and wildly stylized spin on the magical girl genre, while still keeping the heart of what makes the magical girl subgenre of anime work. Thematically, it was still a story of friendship persevering. The initial anime ran for 12 episodes, which I also thought was great because it kept the story tight and without filler. Eventually, they came out with 3 movies. The first 2 basically just summarized what was happening in the series, and then the third one was a continuation of the story, and that's the one where this fight scene occurs. The animation always had a compelling art style to me. It was very reminiscent of Naoko Takeuchi, except if her work was a bit more unhinged and avant-garde. So this fight takes place between 2 of the magical girls who are arguably the strongest in the series, and that is Mami Tomo versus Homura Akemi. And so Mami is the blonde one, Homura is the dark-haired girl. Both of them fight with guns, and they are experienced, serious magical girl fighters who are completely unafraid to kill their opponent if they need to. During the fight, you see them matching each other bullet to bullet, performing these dazzlingly animated feats of magical combat. It's done in a way that is artistically over the top, but I still found it very engaging to watch. And the fight itself resolves in a way that I think made sense for where both of these characters were in the story. One thing that I noticed during this fight was how well the musical score accented the combat that we were watching happen. At number 4 on my list is Wonder Woman vs. the Furies in the 2010 Superman Batman Apocalypse animated movie. Before the live-action Wonder Woman in 2017, there were several animated films from DC that included Wonder Woman that were outstanding. Like, DC has their animation game on point. In Wonder Woman Bloodlines, the final fight scene showed Wonder Woman's ferocity and dedication as a warrior first, and I feel like that's one of the aspects of her backstory that sets her apart from how we often see the other Justice League characters portrayed. I would definitely recommend it, but my favorite Wonder Woman fight scene is in Superman Batman Apocalypse. The scene just felt savage and visceral in the best way possible. They didn't shy away from showing her strength, but they also didn't rely on blood and gore to let us know that the fight was serious. In this fight, she teams up with Big Barda to fight the Furies, who are the elite warriors for Granny Goodness and Darkseid. The actual choreography and animation of the fight scene, I think, was very well done. For example, the part where Wonder Woman wraps her leg around the rope and pulls the Fury into her before kicking her in the head, I think on a technical level was really good. In a lot of animation, they will often just kind of blur those motions, or they will show stills of action, or they stylize it in a way that avoids showing us the actual combat happening. So I appreciated that we were able to see that in this movie. I also really liked the voice acting. There were a lot of grunts and cries, and then the general sound design of like claws clanging and armor smashing and that sort of stuff. I think it added a lot of depth to this fight. Number 3 on my list is from The Legend of Korra, and this is a fight between the Beifong family and Kuvira. Now, The Last Airbender was an amazing show, so I don't want to say that it didn't deserve the acclaim that it had. What I will say is that often the community looks back on The Last Airbender with nostalgia goggles. And I think it prevents us from appreciating how good Legend of Korra was. And I'm also worrying that if they try to bring in new shows or new material with this IP, often the community is very unreceptive to it. In Legend of Korra, the Beifongs are arguably some of the most formidable earthbenders in the entire world, being descended from Toph Beifong, who was one of the main cast members of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and she was one who helped Aang with his earthbending. The Beifongs are the black-clad ninjas with the silver-gray hair, and then Kuvira is the raven-haired soldier with the green outfit on. Kuvira sees herself as uniting the Earth Kingdom under one empire, whereas the Beifongs kind of perceive her as a tyrant. And so this fight was kind of one of their last bids to bring Suyin in there and try to assassinate Kuvira and kind of put an end to her reign before she's able to conquer everything. The animation itself in Legend of Korra has a lot of polish. What I love about this fight scene is that we get to see the earthbending martial arts on full display. Earthbending is based on Southern Chinese martial arts and Shaolin Kung Fu. In The Last Airbender, we see Toph establishing the art of metal bending as well, which is also one of the things that I think is cool about this fight, because we get to see sort of a natural evolution of that metal bending. And we see it in the cables that they're using to propel themselves around the battlefield and the projectiles that Kuvira and them are firing off at each other. I also love the creativity that Suyin shows when she fights. We see it in other places in the series, but in this fight, a couple examples are when she uses the metal to create some makeshift armor around her, or when she snaps off the railing and uses it as like a staff while fighting. There's a lot of that quick on her feet improvisation to the fight that I think makes Suyin a really great opponent. Ultimately, the Beifong family is forced into making a strategic withdrawal from this fight, which I actually think is good in some regards because it helps establish Kuvira as a really tough opponent for Korra and Team Avatar later in the series. Coming in hot at number 2 on my list is from The Legend of Vox Machina. Our group of heroes call themselves Vox Machina, and they are facing off against a storm dragon. The Legend of Vox Machina is a 12-episode animated series on Amazon Prime, and it is based off of the live play show Critical Role. And that is just a bunch of nerdy-ass voice actors sitting around and playing Dungeons and Dragons. I've been following the show for several years now, starting with Campaign 2. And to me, this animated series was just really exciting because we're kind of seeing them going full circle from being voice actors in video games and anime to their podcast and their show, and then back around to this animated series based on the adventures that they had in Campaign 1. What makes this fight so great is the exceptional teamwork. That's kind of a thread that I'm seeing moving through my list. If you look at like number 5, that's 1v1 combat. In the Wonder Woman fight, we see her with Big Barda on her team, but they're just kind of fighting alongside of each other. They're not necessarily working together per se. Then as we move into like the Beifongs and down the list, we're seeing a lot of progressive teamwork happening. So looking at Vox Machina, they're up against this dragon, and this is a badass, powerful dragon who could eviscerate any single one of them, but they're able to work together to overcome a tougher opponent, which I think is pretty awesome. The group's bard Scanlan sets up an illusion in front of the dragon where it looks like Vox Machina is just squabbling amongst themselves. This illusion is really sold to the audience because we have seen a lot of them squabbling, and so them just kind of bumbling around is able to pull the dragon's attention. Afterwards, they just start giving this dragon hell. We see Keyleth, who is their druid, lock the dragon in place with her vines. Then Scanlan helps Vax propel along with his mage hand. Pike gives Veth a magical boost to her arrow. And then once the beast is laid low, we see Grog coming in hard with the coup de grace. All of this was brilliantly set to a more orchestrated professional version of the Critical Role theme song that worked wonderfully in this fight scene. The pacing of Vox Machina is a little bit weird if you aren't familiar with the source material. They're trying to pack many 4-hour-long D&D sessions into these almost 20-minute long episodes, but the animation and the voice acting make it one of the best shows in its class. And with the season 2 on the way, I'm pretty confident that they're only going to get more refined and better in their craft. The final fight on my list is the one that inspired me to make this video in the first place, and to this day remains one of my favorite fight scenes of all time. It is from the Netflix animated series Castlevania in season 2, when our intrepid heroes are storming the castle of Dracula. Our main boy here with the brown hair and the whip is renowned demon slayer Trevor Belmont. Then we have the red-haired battle mage Sypha Belnadus. And rounding out their team is the half-vampire Alucard, fighting against the vampire generals of Dracula. Like many of the battles that we've seen so far, it has a great soundtrack that's underscoring the fight. I love how this fight combines attacks that we've seen in the game series along with just really good fight choreography. We see each of the characters' skills showcased in this fight in a way that hasn't really been done in this series up until this point. So we're seeing Belmont's fancy whip work. We're seeing Alucard doing some shape shifting and his enchanted sword on full display. And then, of course, Sypha is coming through with some really creative and interesting magical attacks and elemental spellcasting. As an example of that creativity is the part where the vampire is running along the plane of ice that she had created, and then she brings it up and bisects him in half. To me, that part was just brutal and exactly the type of thing that I would expect from a spellcaster who is, serious about fighting these demons and vampires and stuff. And once again, we're seeing a lot of great teamwork too, like when Sypha launches Trevor into the air, and then he's able to divide up the vampires so that Alucard is able to take one and then lays the other one low, and Sypha's able to swoop in for that finishing attack with her fire. This fight scene was peak Castlevania for me. In the other seasons, they have some pretty good moments, but overall I just felt like none of them quite culminate in the way that this one does. If you enjoyed these fight scenes and you want to see more, I left links in the description box below so that you can go and check them out. Don't be afraid to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. Thank you so much for watching along today, and I will see you in the next one.